Today, I am joined by an indie filmmaker and college professor who writes, directs, produces, and edits narrative and documentary films. His work is known for combining horror with heart, as well as punk rock flair. You might have seen his 2020 debut feature, Uncle Peckerhead, which still has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way. And now he is following it up with another horror comedy that is currently available on streaming platforms. I'd like to welcome the director of Bloody Axemoot, Matthew John Lawrence, to the podcast. Thanks for joining me, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky.
Yeah, well, the way we typically start these is just going all the way back to the beginning and asking what got you interested in film and genre and art. Was there maybe a person, an experience, a movie or some that, got you hooked?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably my mother. Going back to, those early years, my mom was definitely a huge influence in terms of getting me excited about film. And really, like, my earliest memories of stuff that I watched wasn't, like Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers, both of which I love. But I don't have many memories of watching that. But I used to watch a lot of movies like Ghostbusters and Beverly Hills Cop and stuff like that, even at like a really young age. And I think once my mom saw that I, was really kind of fixated on film more than anything else, she continued to nurture that. So, my, like a lot of really fond memories would be, my mom would get paid every other Friday and she would take my brother and I to the video store, and we each got to pick one movie to watch. And I remember, as far as, genre really kind of taking a hold, it was probably in those years of like, once I started going to school and we'd go to the video store, and this was, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And, obviously the horror covers or the sci-fi covers were the ones that really kind of like drew my attention as a little kid. I think it just, it kind of melted my little, boy brain. So from there, I just got really interested in film. And, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in, middle class, lower middle class. So I didn't really have I didn't have anybody in my orbit, like family, friends of family, friends, parents, like nobody worked in the film and television industry. So really for for the first 20 years of my life, I didn't consider film, a viable option as a career. At times I still don't. But it wasn't until, I think like around my teenager years, I started to kind of, flirt with the idea because, growing up in New Jersey, when Kevin Smith kind of hit the scene, that really kind of opened my eyes. I had never, it sounds silly now, but this is like, pre the mainstreaming of internet. But I never thought that it was something that I could do. I really thought it was something that happened, 3,000 miles away in Hollywood by, it sounds like, a very romantic thing. And it was that these magical people made movies. And I didn't really connect myself to that at all. And I started college pre-law or whatever pre-law was, like poli-sci or whatever. And after my first semester or two, I absolutely hated it. And what I did was I stayed at that college, and that college didn't really have a robust film program. Whatever film classes they had, I took. But I really got interested in creative writing and stuff like that. And then when I graduated college, I was in a band. So we toured and released a record for a couple of years. And when that band broke up, I started to work in advertising. And I kind of just ingratiated myself with their videography department. I had taken, I think a couple of production classes at that point, but I was like by no means, I was like a very, very, I would consider myself a novice, very, very in the beginner stages of, filmmaking and just kind of understanding, form and stuff like that. But I really kind of like, any free time I had, I would hang out in that pocket of the videography department. I would help them out on shoots on weekends or nights. I learned how to edit, through that. But I really felt that, in terms of my skill set and my understanding of like film, I mean, that was like a lot of like corporate videos and just kind of like videos for their online presence and stuff like that. And this was like 2005 or six. So this isn't, this was like pre-YouTube. Or maybe around the time YouTube was about to break. And I just felt like woefully kind of ignorant as far as like how to make movies. I kind of talk about this with my students, since you mentioned I was a professor, is that like, I had taste and I knew how I wanted my stuff to look and sound, but there was just this huge chasm, this kind of like Grand Canyon's distance between, my taste and how I was executing. So I decided to, look into grad school. And that's when, I went to Boston University and went into into their film program. And that's when it kind of really, blew it open for me. And I just kind of fell in love with filmmaking. And, since like 2007, 2008, I've been making, I've been making movies. So yeah, that was kind of my long-winded journey of how I got into film.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people had a similar experience. If you don't grow up within the industry or know anybody, it feels so far away. And then it kind of takes some of those experiences, maybe in college years, getting exposed to it to see that, oh, maybe that's a reality, as well as maybe some filmmakers, that represent something similar to you in your background. So when you were decided to go to film school formally and get your MFA, were you thinking that you wanted to write and direct, or just be involved in film in general? Did you have a specific area you were targeting?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, for the few classes I had taken in undergrad, or like what I had kind of dabbled in at that advertising agency, was now looking back on it, I don't think I was like seriously, like earnestly, that was what I was going to do. But I was like, well, I really like photography. I always liked kind of operating the camera when I worked. I would always operate kind of like a B camera. Once I kind of, made my way into the videography department at that advertising agency. So I started, we didn't have to declare, but my interest was in cinematography. And it just so happened, my first semester at grad school, I'd be lying if I said like writing wasn't a passion of mine, but I didn't really think that I'd want to, be a screenwriter for whatever reason. But I took a screenwriting class, and the professor just is like one of those, encounters where, you meet somebody who just kind of changes the trajectory of your life. And this professor, John Bernstein, just like, was really encouraging and gave me feedback I needed to hear, but feedback that was constructive and I think made me better and made me want to be better. So I got really interested in screenwriting. And just through that, I felt that it was really difficult. I think I had done a couple of projects where somebody, another director, kind of took my screenplay for an exercise or whatever. And I didn't feel like it kind of like translated the vibe or the tone or just kind of the energy that I wanted. So just through that, because I was kind of reluctant to get into the directing at Boston University, because you would have to take acting classes. And I would define myself as a pretty shy person. I was like, painfully shy growing up. I find it very difficult to, I can't imagine performing, in terms of like in certain ways. And that may be surprising as a professor, but that even, it took a lot of kind of coaxing myself to kind of get into it. But I was so reluctant to follow the directing path because of those acting classes. But same thing, I took an acting class. And while I wouldn't say it's a passion of mine, I think it really forced me to get out of my comfort zone. And I think that was really good for me. And once I did that, then I kind of realized that, I really enjoyed the idea of kind of pushing myself and challenging myself in ways that directing kind of sets up. So from that experience of that first semester or two, I just kind of fell in love with the idea of, I still am really in love, obviously, with all the formal elements of filmmaking, but I definitely, fell pretty hard for, directing and screenwriting. And I kind of like started to kind of like fall back when it came to, cinematography and pursuing that.
And really, if you are somebody that loves all of the art forms, directing is that wonderful position where you kind of get to be a part of all of them, and putting it together and seeing how, the music and the visual design pair. So I can totally see, knowing that you have an interest in cinematography as well as music, that all of those things would kind of come together. I wanted to ask you something about film school. I also attended film school and can relate to going to those acting classes and how much it put me outside of my comfort zone as well. But it was a really great experience to build more empathy with your actors and performers, so you as a director actually know what it's like being so vulnerable. And that is one of the things I think the beauty of film school is that, it can expose you to a lot of different things. And maybe you thought you wanted to do cinematography, but you met that very impactful screenwriting professor that, helped kind of boost your love of writing. But I do find that film school is kind of a debated thing among filmmakers and questioning whether or not it truly is valuable. So, one of the questions coming into this I did want to ask you is kind of what your perspective on that was, both as somebody that teaches, in media, as well as, someone that makes indie films, and also did attend film school. What's your perspective on the value relative
Yeah.
to maybe just starting out, jumping right in?
I think it depends like what your ultimate goal is. And I think it's really tough when and I know people go to college or return to college at all different ages, but I think especially for, the vast majority of students who start their college career, would start their film school career, somewhere between, I think, like most, like 18 and 40, between 18 and 40, and especially for undergrad, it's like 18 to 25. It's really tough to know, like, what do you want to do? I think for the path I took as an independent artist, it was really helpful. I also think I got really lucky. I met like not a lot. I met a few collaborators that I still work with to this day. I feel like I had a couple of really strong relationships with faculty who I think really pushed me and made me better and made me really fall in love with it. I think I went at a good time where, I had tried a few things. I was in a band and doing that. Then I went to advertising. So when I went in, I was like highly motivated, even for a grad student. So I think it's tough. I mean, I teach at a school that I love because it's not a film school. It's like it's a liberal learning education. So I teach within the communication studies department. And while the classes I largely teach are, production or filmmaking focused, students, have to take a pretty wide breadth of classes related to all different types of disciplines and across disciplines, which is something similar to like what I did when I went to school as an undergrad. And I think that really helped me in that, like, I got to try a bunch of, I had to take a bunch of psychology, sociology, philosophy, history, art classes beyond, photography and film and writing classes. And I think that gave me kind of a taste of things and made me appreciate as a learner, not just having this hyper focused thing that I start at 18 and that's the only thing I know and pursue for the rest of my life. So I know that's a roundabout way to get to. I think it's different for people. There are people that I'm friends with that had the same exact program that took, were in the same exact program I was, same years, same faculty, and had a wildly different experience that wasn't quite as formative and positive. I wouldn't say it was negative, but just didn't have quite such a formative experience. And now, some of them don't even work in the industry. So I think it's really tough. I think there are some people, depending what they want, if you but if you want to work, in a certain department, it would help if you have a connection just to start working on film sets. I felt like I did a little bit of that. And I felt like, for what I wanted to do, I couldn't see a path to get to where I wanted to get. And also I wasn't sure of the path I wanted to take, for the first 25 years of my life. So it's really tough. I mean, I think it really depends on the person. And if I were to talk to somebody, I would say, no matter what, college and specifically film school is so freaking expensive that you don't want to make that decision lightly because, I'm still paying off my federal loans. And I feel like with the interest, I'll be paying them off and just kind of the job. I teach at a public institution. I don't make a ton of money. The films I've made have not made a ton of money. So, I still think it's worth it because I think my life wouldn't be anywhere close to where it is now. And I'm largely happy with, like the creative experiences I've had. But there's just some people like, my wife and I always talk about, we don't have a kid. But if we did, like how we would treat higher education and specifically if they wanted to get into the arts, how we would treat them. And I think it's just having the person kind of unpack in their head or kind of imagine like what do you want to get out of this program? What do you hope to learn? Where do you hope to be in the future? In like, it sounds corny, but a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line. And is this the best method? And you can only go off of, your anecdotal experiences, the research that you do and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, film school, I know people are like, on one end of the spectrum or the other. Very few people have kind of like a neutral, whatever attitude about their experience. It's either people feel that, it was well worth it or, it was absolutely like a cash burn. And I feel like I just fall under, it was worth it. I'm still in debt. But I think it gave me a ton. I learned how to make movies. It was like a really great program in that they really kind of like threw you in the deep end. And, by the end of my second year, I felt like I had a hand. I mean, obviously you just need to make movies and continue making movies even after, your tenure at that school ends. But I feel like, that was such like a trial by fire, which for somebody like me, I needed.
Yeah, we've talked to a lot of guests and everybody has such a different path into the industry. And I think the one real answer, like you said, is there is no one path for everyone. And I think it's a right time, right place, right mindset. You have to be, at a good time in your life to get the most out of the experience. And some people are not in that mindset. And for some people, financially, it just may not be worth the benefit. But I think that's the one thing I've learned is there is definitely no right way to go. It's different for everyone. And kind of speaking of different paths, I think one of the other most common things people talk about is like, how do you get your first feature film off the ground? So I kind of want to transition now to Uncle Peckerhead, which I adore that movie. I always reference it, to people. I'm like, if you want a horror movie that like makes you feel really good at the end of the day, but is still a true, horror movie with the gore, this is it. How did Uncle Peckerhead come about? And did you like raise the money? Was it self-funded? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. Uncle Peckerhead was completely self-funded by myself and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, Wiki Mendoza, who was a producer on the film and, has been a collaborator of mine for the past like 10 years. She helped kind of kick in some money too. Basically, what had happened was I was trying to get another script made, which was Bloody Axe Wound. And around like 2015, I had a version of the script together. I kept drafting it out. Around 2016, I felt we had a draft that I was kind of like happy with, proud of. So we got two actresses attached, not like, Nicole Kidman level, but like actresses with like their resume and, with their, how amazing they were at like, the read through could, attract some potential investors. And what happened was, I'll just kind of make it really short because this isn't Peckerhead centric, but we had raised, a considerable amount of money, more money than I had ever raised for any movie up until that point, and more money than we will raise, a couple of years later for Peckerhead. But we needed to hit a certain dollar amount to even like, consider being able to make it. And what happened was, just like long story short, the deal we had with the two actresses where we could use their name for fundraising and they were attached to the project, that contract was running up. It was basically like we needed to make a move. We needed to get more money quick, and we just couldn't. And basically, like within a span of like a month or two, everything fell through. So like, it really felt for like a couple of months that we were going to be able to make it. It was like a reality. And then just like, it was such like a very a creatively traumatic event. And, I licked my wounds for a couple of months and just I was really butthurt about the experience. Not that it was anybody in particular. It was just like really bad luck. And I vowed at that point, I was like, the next project I make, I'm going to make sure that it's something that I feel that we could execute for under $100,000. I can self-fund it. I can call upon all favors. Like my brother at that point was working in the music industry. He worked at a venue. He knew, several other venues either he had worked with previously or just friends of friends. My friend Jeff Riddle, who was in my short film Larry Gun Demon, was really interested in working together again. He plays Max and wrote all the music. So I kind of like talked to him about this idea of creating this fake band, writing all this. He was so game. And basically we just kind of like, we were off to the races. I started writing a script when Bloody Axe Wound, the first like incarnation fell through. That was like around like 2016, late 2016. So like late 2016, I started writing the script. 2017, drafted it out. And then in June, I think it was June 2018, we shot it. And like to get it in the can and at its first festival, which was its only festival because of the pandemic, Panic Fest, I think it cost us just like around $80,000. And that's just because, everybody either worked for free or at a crazy discount. I called in every single favor I had. I wrote, directed, produced, edited. My wife produced it with me. Jeff wrote the music, acted in it. It's his van that's in the movie. Basically, it was like, such a skeleton crew of people, like most micro-budget filmmaking, like everybody wearing about a dozen hats. You're barely making your day. We only shot for, I think, 17 days, 18 days, probably with like a half-day pickup. So So it was just like, it was, a very ragtag DIY. I mean, much like we were definitely art reflecting life, or life reflecting art. Yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was a crazy experience, but, it was pretty life changing, as far as like, it didn't send me rocketing to the heights of Hollywood. But I, like you mentioned, I cannot believe, even though there's only like, 20 reviewers, I can't believe we're 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. I can't believe that people still, will shoot me a DM or a really sweet email, like your intro talking about the movie. It's in part like, I love making movies that, like, what was such a shame with Peckerhead is I always want, not always, but like, I'm really not fascinated, but it's just, I love the feeling of watching a movie with an audience, not even my movie. I love, like, some of my favorite movie going experiences are real. Like, I remember seeing There's Something About Mary for the first time, or seeing, an Evil Dead 2 screening with Robert Kurtzman at the Alamo, where it's like a sold out, and there's so many more, but the sold out packed crowd, and just like an absolute banger of an audience movie. And just like the adrenaline rush. I mean, it feels like a concert. It feels like the best drug that you've ever taken. Like, it's just like this, it just like, and especially like, if it's something that you had a hand in, or you were a part of, to know that you and your friends came together and collaborated and made this thing that connected with people. Yeah, it's amazing. So it was just like, it was such an incredible experience, incredibly tough to make, but just like something where it's like, you get to really enjoy the fruits of your labor with your best friends who all worked on it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about kind of the film festival circuit, like going out with this movie that was very kind of heartwarming and very much a crowd pleaser. What was that like, going out and seeing, play in front of like these crowds of people and seeing them actually react to it the way you intended?
Well, I mean, Becky, the shame of it is, and I definitely suffered the least probably of many people during the pandemic. But what's really stunk is we finished post on the film in fall of 2019. Yeah, 2019. We premiered at Panic Fest in Kansas City, which is a great festival. I think it was January 2020. This is before they moved their dates, and it was amazing. I mean, we got to go to one screening. It was myself, Wiki, who is a producer, David, who played Peckerhead, was there, and one of the other producers. And it was an amazing screening. It's like the thing you've been working on for like 2 to 3 years to get to that point. Like, you suffer for this moment, and it was great. And we were so excited because after that, we were set to play like the Florida Film Festival, Cinequest. We had like, 6 or 7 other festivals lined up. And then I think the next festival we were playing was Cinequest in San Jose, or I think it was like Bay Area. And I flew out because my wife actually lived in San Francisco at the time. I flew out to hang out with her. And the week we were hanging out with that weekend coming up to go to Cinequest was when everything shut down because of the pandemic. So our entire festival run, save for that premiere at Panic Fest, was completely canceled. And while we were really lucky in that, like, we had a bunch of support from like Portland Horror did, I think, a remote festival that we played. Calgary Underground did a drive-in. We didn't get to really experience any of them. We got to do like some online stuff of kind of connecting with watch parties and stuff like that, which was absolutely amazing and incredible. But I mean, that's been like the thing that's like, I've been chomping at the bit, is I would love to do like a Peckerhead screening, or even Bloody Axe Wound. I went to, one screening at the IFC Center, which was amazing, but we still haven't gotten to do like a proper screening with like, both those screenings were kind of like, a packed crowd. But I make movies because I want to kind of engage and entertain people. That's like, one of my number one goals. And it's been such a bummer that like, you get to connect with people one-on-one, but I would love to watch people watching it.
I can definitely relate to that heartbreak too. I had a short film that went on the circuit in 2020 as well, and it was the only film I ever I've made that got into Fantasia, and I was so excited to screen with Fantasia. And then of course, I couldn't do that, and there was the virtual screenings instead. And I just realized we watched it with an audience for the first time just last year at a local con was wanting like local filmmakers to screen work, and we thought, wait, we've never actually watched this movie with an audience, and it's been 4 years. And it was really nice to see it with people and see them laugh at, all the parts they were supposed to laugh at and all of that. So yeah, it's really heartbreaking when you can't, share it with the world. That is part of the one of the greatest joys, right, of being a filmmaker is seeing how people respond to your work. At least you got a couple good screenings in, but it sounds like it'd be fun to take Uncle Peckerhead on the road again, to maybe, see it live in front of audiences, that didn't get a chance to kind of experience it that way.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm excited, and it's like what's great is like Peckerhead is just like the little engine that could. In that, like I still can't believe after like it's been now 5 years since we released it, and people are still like so incredibly nice and supportive of it. So it's great that it's still connecting. But I'd love to watch it with like a bunch of people that are chomping at the bit.
Did you ever run into any challenges with the movie in terms of the tone of it being like very sentimental, but also having all this kind of carnage in it? Like when you were originally pitching the concept, or trying to get other collaborators on board, or maybe down the road with marketing, was that ever a tension and like how to market this movie?
Yeah, I mean, no, there wasn't really any like tension or, I mean, I can't help because I'm a glutton for punishment to read reviews. And I know like some folks take issue with it, and I can definitely understand like the tonal shift at the end. Yeah, it's a tough one to square because when we released it through Dread, they didn't really have an issue with, the kind of it is a weird mix in that like I'm glad like you really took to the heartfelt nature, because that's one thing that I've wanted to do is to make kind of heartfelt horror movies, especially like heartfelt horror comedies. I like stuff that isn't just one thing. I don't like stuff that feels unfocused, but I do like stuff that isn't just one, like it's not just one thing. So I think, yeah, I mean, I definitely know that luckily since it was self-funded and since like basically when Dread released it, they had everything except for like the key art. So there wasn't really much that we could change. We couldn't like, we weren't going to pay any money to like reshoot or re-edit or whatever, and they seemed pretty pleased with it. But I know just from like reading reviews and hearing people's feedback through like interviews, like one of the best interviews I did for Peckerhead was, I forget what the podcast was called, but it was a Scottish guy who basically was kind of like pitching me on kind of some of the critiques and having me kind of comment on them. But I thought it was like a really great conversation, because I think while I don't listen to every piece of feedback or every critique and then like change my approach for the next film. I mean, ultimately, you're living and dying by what an audience thinks of your stuff and like if they're going to engage with it. So I feel like, it's important to kind of listen and take that stuff in. And I do feel like, there's just things like any filmmaker, when I watch Peckerhead, there are things where I'm like, man, I didn't stick the landing there, or like, yeah, I can see where people have like an issue with this part, or I can see why people like don't really, can't really gel with this moment, because you want to just get better and you want to get better. Like, I hope that there's a really, truly like great, heartfelt horror comedy that is, tonally consistent and like just I can fire on all cylinders. Cause like, it's like, I feel as a filmmaker, you're just like, I feel like I'm getting it. I feel like I kind of understand. Like with Peckerhead, I had made a film before that was like a feature, but we played festivals, but we never got distribution because of like a whole music rights thing. And I feel like that was because I didn't do a third year of film school. I feel that really kind of helped me to learn, because like I had high hopes for it. It did not do, I wanted to get distribution. I wanted to play, like a Fantasia or a big genre festival. It didn't do really well. And it just kind of like, I learned a bunch of lessons. And instead of saying like, listen, like it's the audience's fault or it's people's fault, it's not mine. I did it. I perfected it. I just kind of like, I sat with it and I kind of like reconciled that there are just some things that don't click. Like you have this idea, you try it out and it just may not take. And luckily with Peckerhead, it was consistent enough that people kind of, connected with it. But when it came to, trying to kind of mix a hybrid mix of tone and maybe energy, I mean, that's like, I can see why. I mean, I've definitely had a bunch of projects get rejected because they think, not that it's incomparable, but they're looking for something in the vein of this type of movie. And I feel like that for me is kind of tough because, I'm not interested in making, stuff that is just kind of like one, I wouldn't say one note because that's insulting, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. Sometimes, it's easier for people to package things up and put it in the box. Sometimes for people that are making movies to get it sold, and then also for audiences sometimes to understand. It can be simpler, but I think that there's a lot of room for people that don't necessarily want the simple one and they want maybe something that's a little more challenging or will take them on a little bit more of a journey. So, and I think I love that you mentioned accepting the critique and kind of filtering it in the right ways, right? You're not going to change kind of what you want to do based off of audience reactions, but it's also a great learning tool because ultimately it's just trying to find a way to connect with people. And, maybe there's ways without, sacrificing or changing, what's core to your story, there's ways to better connect with more people. So I love that you were kind of self-reflective about that. I have one more question about Peckerhead. I have to ask, did anyone ever try to get you to change the title?
No, I mean, that's one thing I will give to Dread is that they did not ask me to cut the movie or change it or change the title. And again, this was like, probably 5 or 6 years ago, but I think, or maybe even longer. But I think there was like, do you want to keep the title? And I said, yeah. And I think that was it. I honestly, and I know you're probably not asking for this reason, but that's one thing where like hearing feedback of people like, I'm so glad I watched this. I originally was not going to watch it because the title made me think of a completely different movie. And now that I've watched it, it's so much better than the title would let on. And I like one thing I teach my students this, not that it has to be Uncle Peckerhead or nothing, but like I always think that having a truly unique title, both for like SEO on the internet, but just like a unique title that is both grabs your attention. If you plug it into Google, you will be the first thing that comes up no matter what. Like it just like I have kind of like a few benchmarks that it has to hit. And that's that Uncle Peckerhead just like I felt kind of encapsulated that character. I felt that, and this was before like Peckerhead was kind of like, I think since then it's been kind of appropriated by, hardline conservative people as like an insult to others, which kind of like bums me out. But besides that, like, yeah, I mean, it never came up as a thing to change, but then like some of the people have a pretty visceral reaction to the title sometimes, which I didn't expect the reaction to be quite so like, yeah, what a terrible title given what people that think it's kind of really loved on it or thought it was a gem of a movie. Some people really just were turned off by the title, which kind of blew my mind.
Well, speaking of horror comedies with striking titles, let's talk about Bloody Axe Wound.
Yes.
So it sounds like the story has been rolling around in your head for a long time, since at least 2015, it sounds like. Maybe it goes back even further. What was the genesis for the idea?
Yeah, so like the 2015-2016 version was pretty different in that like I just joined the Brooklyn Filmmaker Collective and I just wanted kind of a script to workshop in that group, and they've kind of mostly focused on features. The writer's workshop usually focused on features, so I just wanted to try my hand at a new feature idea. So the real genesis was I thought, and I still don't know, I'm sure there's some horror nerd out there that's going to tell me there's another movie that did it, but I was trying to think of a movie where the killer in a slasher movie becomes the final girl by the end. And that was kind of the genesis for it, is I wanted this character to have this transformation to go from killer to final girl, or, that final survivor archetype in slasher movies. So I started to, from there, I just started to write it. I would say the first couple drafts were not the best. They were kind of like more workplace comedy. There wasn't really any of that emotional core of the friction between Abby and her dad. So it was just, I wasn't thrilled with it, but we kept developing it out. And then finally, after like a year of developing it, I realized like one of the things that was missing that like, as per our previous conversation from earlier, is I was like, there's really no kind of emotional core here. And like, what would kind of give it some real conflict and turmoil and kind of how can I ground this so it doesn't feel like just like kind of, I always described, the first couple drafts as like Cabin in the Woods fan fiction, So I think like, that's kind of where it kind of took off. And I feel like that's when it kind of found its legs. And I'd say by like the third or fourth draft, it resembled something like, the movie we ended up making.
I was going to ask about kind of the meta ideas in it. And it sounds like Cabin in the Woods may have been, partially an inspiration. There's a lot of kind of iconic meta horror movies out there. Obviously, like Scream is probably the grandmother or grandfather of them all. But was it a challenge to make sure you kind of had your own fresh take on it? Were there things that you were trying to avoid to make sure it didn't feel too much like a, wink, wink, nod that we've seen in the past?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I think that's a great way to kind of like, that's kind of what I was thinking is I didn't want it to be too cute or too winky or too like kind of trying to posture or show kind of like my in-depth knowledge of the genre or just kind of make it feel like scary. I mean, I love the scary movie franchise, but like have it feel like just kind of like this empty, just kind of like checking boxes as far as what I'm referencing. Like I think as far as like what my goal was to kind of keep my eye on the ball in that I wanted to make a hugely entertaining, like wild, fun movie. And it just so happened that the way in which I wanted to tell that specific story involved kind of taking on this meta nature. I think like the real challenge is just this was such kind of a seismic change in making movies because I went from like, an $80,000 feature to then like it was still a tier zero, but it was like a full union shoot with a lot of producers through, Shudder and RLJE. So it's just, you're trying to keep your vision focused while also creatively collaborating with a ton more people than I'd ever collaborated with before. Like my wife, Wiki, was the associate producer on this one. There were a ton of other producers. And prior to that on Peckerhead, it was just like, like 3 or 4 of us making all, like literally every important creative decision. That's not to say that, that wasn't collaborative. I mean, it was hugely collaborative, but ultimately it was 3 or 4 of us kind of, being the final stamp. And we had worked with, a lot of us had worked with each other for like over a decade. So we were completely, in lockstep with one another, had kind of the vision. Whereas this, you're just trying to juggle like sometimes like diametrically opposed ways in which, you see the movie. So I think that's kind of the real challenge is like, not just kind of the balance of the meta-ness without it being, it's just the creative balancing of trying to tell a story like that and have everyone feel like they're a part of that creative collaborative process.
Yeah, it sounds like a completely different type of production. And you mentioned, earlier about like how heartbreaking it was when the financing fell through.
Yeah.
So how did it end up coming about the second time around? Did the success with Uncle Peckerhead sort of help kickstart that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So Peckerhead came out. It was released during the pandemic. So August of 2020, it was released. And this is no joke. This is not embellishment. I got a DM from Jeffrey Dean Morgan, where he had watched it like during the pandemic when he wasn't working. He was just like, he's a bit of a night owl as I came to know. And he would just like watch movies at night. So he watched Uncle Peckerhead, loved it, showed it to his wife, and they reached out to me and they said, what are you working on? And I said, I've got nothing. This movie just got released. It's the pandemic. I have no connections. I'm not a part of a union. I don't have an agent or a manager or anything. So they asked if I had anything. I had 3 scripts at that point. I sent that to them. They really liked 2 of the scripts, one of which was Bloody Axe Wound. And then it took a while. I think they signed me to like a shopping agreement. So they got to exclusively shop 2 of the scripts for a year. At that point, I think AMC was interested. AMC and Shudder were interested. But it was a bit of like kind of feeling, I mean, I wasn't really a part of this. It was pretty siloed for me. But as far as I understand, they were kind of feeling each other out. So it's not like we were even in like kind of a development hell. It was just kind of like for 2 years, there was this kind of like, are we officially greenlit? What's going on? And then just like, what was it? The winter of 21 or 22, I forget. It just was like, take your leave of absence from school next semester. And we shot in, I think it was June of 2023. We shot the movie. We shot for 18 days, but it was a crazy journey because like when that fell through in like 2016, like I basically had kind of made my peace that wasn't going to be a project, I thought would have a life. It would just be kind of a fun script idea where maybe I'd kind of pillage some ideas or some scenes for other stuff. And then it all, it came together in such a way that it kind of blows my mind that, I thought really kind of the nail was in the coffin him with that idea and then kind of bringing it back. And obviously, like during those 2 years, I was drafting out like different things, and kind of like once we had cast certain parts or once we were thinking about casting a part, I would kind of like, tinker with like certain characters and certain exchanges and stuff like that. So it's been a crazy journey. Yeah. Cause it's been like something that's been kind of, I've been sitting with for 10 years off and on.
Oh, that's awesome. It must have been pretty wild getting that DM from Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I can only imagine. Earlier, we talked about kind of making sure the film was, weaving in things from the horror genre, but in, maybe more clever ways. And I will say Bloody Accident is packed with a bunch of Easter eggs and homages that, are fun, some more subtle than others. Do you have one that is like a favorite, or maybe one that's like most people have missed when they've watched it? If you can, without spoiling anything, of course.
What? Oh, yeah. So there's a poster that my wife, who's a designer, made called Hacksaw Hookers of Paramus. And it's just a poster that's up for like a second, but it's like something where I actually want to get a really nice printed poster of it and hang it up, because it's like she designed it like the old Chopper Chicks in Zombie Town poster. And it's amazing. It's just like an amazing, she mocked it up in like a day. And it's like something that I could see as like an iconic VHS cover. So that's just like, there's like so many things like that. We have so much kind of like Alec Hugill, who designed all the Blade Cut posters. Lisa Myers, who is our production designer, and her team, she was so game to pack each frame with so many just like really detailed, sneaky things. So, I mean, all of that, all of kind of the design stuff that, you just have to kind of pause the frame and see what's going on. As far as like, a performance or a scene or something like that, it's really tough because like I feel there's so many things I love, and it's like, choosing a favorite child. But I really love Eddie Levy, who played Glenn. I think when he plays the old vagrant in the woods, that's probably one of my favorites, which is a reference to, the Friday the 13th.
Yeah, Crazy Ralph.
Crazy Ralph. Yeah, exactly. I love that I didn't give him many reference points besides that, and I think he was great in that. Yeah, it's really tough. I'm always curious when people start watching it, what they saw and what they took to. I mean, one thing that I'm so devastated over, you get to see it during the credits a little bit, but with Angel, who plays Izzy, we had them do this like, they did this dance number. It's basically like Abby is kind of stalking Izzy as she dances in her room alone. But basically in what I would consider to be the director's cut, they enter into this fantasy where they do this dance sequence, and then Abby's kind of pulled out of this dream sequence and then like realizes where she is and pushes her out the window. But Angel Theory, who plays Izzy, is like an amazing dancer, and so is Sari, who played Abby. Angel like kind of put together this dance. They practiced it they worked on it for a half day, the choreography, and they did it. And it was amazing. When they first, we did kind of like a walkthrough and we started to rehearse it, like, something is good when basically like everyone on set just kind of stops what they're doing and is just like silently watching and smiling. And that's what was kind of a bummer is, I think the powers that be thought that it kind of was too weird and it slowed down. I don't know why they think it would slow down because it's a dance sequence, but I think they thought it was like a bridge too far as far as the weirdness. And I love that because I love Friday the 13th Part 5 with Violet dancing. That was like one of the kills in like a slasher movie that just kind of like stuck out to me. I just like, it's so simple how they shot out that sequence, but I just love like, it's such an odd, weird kind of quirky character to kind of like put into a movie. But yeah, that's the one that like wasn't as fully realized as I wanted it to be, but I love, that's like a reference that like, if I saw that, I would be so tickled by it.
Well, guess what? I was tickled by it, and I totally, thank you for confirming. In my mind, I'm like, this is totally a Part 5 reference, because I love that Friday the 13th, and it's not considered one of the best ones, but I personally love it because it's like the most grindhousey of all of them.
Dude, absolutely.
So I totally got it, and I did see that in the credits, so I was very happy.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love heartfelt stuff, there is something just about how you mentioned like how grindhouse and how kind of like, not in like even a negative way, how mean spirited that one is. It's just like, I really do love the Friday the 13th installments just because they all feel so different. And in terms of like just formally, a lot of them are like really decently made for like a, kind of a schlocky slasher movie. There's some really nice kind of like oneers that they have. And yeah, I mean, I just think they're they're properly rated amongst the horror community, but there's a lot of my kind of like film friends that I think would appreciate parts of it, especially those that kind of like can really fuck with genre, that I don't think they're given enough of like a nod or attention.
Totally agree. There's more than meets the eye with the Friday the 13th franchise. One quick question about, I was curious, the wolf mask. Is that a reference to Peach Fuzz from Creep, or is that just
No.
coincidence?
No, it's not. And like that was like one of the first things when the trailer got released. I had seen Creep, but it didn't even register for me. A couple of things, like one of the visual, like whenever I start coming up with a movie, I just try and think of like things that strike me visually, like something that's stuck in my head. And I think one of the things that had stuck in my head was I was living in New York City at the time, and I was riding the subway, and it was like 9 or 10 p.m. And one of the like at the other end of the train car that I was riding in, there was somebody, and again, I couldn't tell their age because they were wearing a mask, but they seemed like that they were a kid, like they were kind of lanky, and they just had this wolf mask on, and it wasn't Halloween, and I just really loved the look. They were kind of dressed like a skater, and they just had on this white wolf mask, and I was so like taken by it, and I thought like it looked menacing, but it was also like it had kind of an innocence to it, and that's just something that stuck. I think it's just something that stuck with me, you know, when I first started working on the script. I'm sorry if I live right next to a church, literally, and they keep ringing the bell now that it's at the hour.
No worries.
But what had happened was I just was kind of fixated on that. And I think there's like one line in it, but in an earlier draft, Roger, the dad, would always like call Abby Little Wolf or his Little Wolf. And that's just really where it came from, is like, and I think that I hadn't seen Creep in, like, once we started like deciding to make the movie, I hadn't seen Creep in years. I forgot that he wears a wolf mask. And I just thought, you know, just this idea of this big bad, like I just seeing that subway car with that kid riding it had such a real striking like visual of kind of like this menacing wolf mask, but this kind of unassuming skater kid kind of body. And I thought that was such an interesting and kind of off-putting juxtaposition. So that's what really kind of stuck with me. And I went with it. And then, like, you know, it's one of those things that, like, as we were making it, I didn't hear from, you know, that's something where I'm like, you know, I wonder if I had heard, and I went back and I like watched Creep or saw those stills, if I would have kept it as a wolf. I'm so glad that it was at least like a white wolf and not an exact replica of that one. But yeah, no, that was just born out of just seeing some random kid on a subway car in a white wolf mask, like skateboarding.
I love it. Either way, though, it in a movie like this, some people may interpret it as homage, and that totally works for the movie,
No,
regardless, even if they do. But
My
and it
wife-
does have a different feel in Bloody Axewound, to your point, because it has someone with such a small frame, and it's like that cognitive dissonance is very creepy.
Yeah. And my wife says the same thing. She's like, dude, do not explain anything. Just say, yeah, totally. That's it is a totally.
Yeah. So the practical effects in this movie are just awesome. Loved seeing like all the creative kills. Definitely see how you're pulling from a lot of slasher inspiration. Was there any effect that was particularly difficult to shoot, or anything that you had to cut just because it didn't work out?
You know, I don't think we cut anything out. Jared Baylog, who is our like effects guru, makeup and effects, he did everything from Roger's very intensive practical makeup to, you know, every you know, blood burst, blood squirt that you see on screen. And I don't think there's anything that we had to cut because it didn't work. He's amazing. I've been working with him since Peckerhead. He's like one of those guys that, like, you know, because I think both in terms of like slasher, but I also like, I love cartoons, and I really want my movies to also kind of have like a live action cartoon kind of feel. And Jared's like one of those people that just like anything, like coming from the DIY school, I'll think of something and I'll be like, I don't think we can do that. I can't imagine that would take, you know, less than 3 or 4 days, and we just don't have the time. And anything I would pitch to him, he would always be game to at least like follow, like he can always do it, and he would do his best to try and make it work given kind of the limited resources, whether that be money, time, whatever. He and his team were absolutely incredible. It's not so much the effect itself, but I think one of the toughest ones we did was probably like either when Mitch and Laverne, who are at the lakeside, get killed, because that was like we had to shoot that entire scene for the second half of our day, which was actually overnight. And it's just like that was a kind of a truncated, condensed version of that scene, and you just don't have time to get everything you need. So I think with stuff like that, there were a couple of moments in that, like especially when Laverne meets her demise, where it's like a one and done. We don't have enough time to clean the windshield of blood. We don't have enough time to get her in and out of wardrobe, showered, and done up again. So it's like, that's it. And there were a few moments like that, but that was like a moment where the sun's coming up. We literally have 20 minutes to get it done. Either it happens or it doesn't. So that's where, I don't feel like I'm a typically very anxious person, but that's where, your butthole is like totally puckered. You're just like losing your mind, thinking you're not going to get it. And then you get it. I think like the most impressive thing to me is I had always wanted to do like really intensive prosthetics and makeup effects, and being able to kind of create the character of Roger and like have Jared kind of like really work with me and kind of developing the look and kind of the style and the feel of it was incredible. I'm like in love with doing is basically being able to take a, kind of like an idea or just something that visually I'm just like, I don't know how we're going to do this or how to kind of manifest this, and working with somebody or a team of people and being able to kind of like bring it to life and do stuff like that, is just kind of a dream. It's like, it's one of those things that like, just going back to kind of like what we talked about at the open, if I had told myself at 10 years old that I'd be doing stuff like this, I can't imagine at that age something that I would have blown my mind more and made me like happier than like being able to kind of like come up with really demented, weird, twisted, funny, crazy, cartoony sequences or kind of deaths or just kind of like wild kind of characters that look a certain way, and just being able to work with intensely creative, fun people that are game to bring those dreams to life.
That's awesome. While we're kind of coming full circle here, I have one last question in the formal interview portion, and it's a big one. Do you have any advice for other people, other filmmakers that want to break into the industry, or people just starting out with their art?
Yeah, I always do. And it's really tough because it also like it depends what you want to do. But I think the one thing that never led me astray, as far as no matter like what I've decided to do or what project I've embarked on or what path I've decided to take is, and I mean this sincerely, is always be nice, always be kind. You're no better than anybody else. And this I have to tell myself this, not that part, but I have to tell myself this literally every day, is you just got to do it. I'm in a period right now where I'm working on a new script, and you just hit that slump where you're just like, is this funny? Is this anything? Am I just spinning my wheels? I'm just sitting and thinking about this stupid thing and the levee hasn't broken yet. But the important thing is that every day I'm sitting, I'm thinking, I'm writing, I'm working. And even if, I'm in this slump of like a week where I'm just like really uninspired by stuff, it's don't give up, don't fuck off and just start mindlessly doom scrolling, on your phone or going down and just watching another episode of Love Island. Although that is sometimes nice to just kind of like decompress. It's just to continually work at it. If you want to be a writer, it's everybody says it, but there's a reason why everybody says it. You have to write every day. If you want to direct, don't wait for that feature script to get picked up by Paramount. Don't even wait for $80,000 to make Peckerhead. You have a phone. Like I still to this day, when I'd be thinking of shooting out a sequence for Bloody Axeman, when I knew it was a done deal, I would grab my friend Jeff, my wife Wiki, and I would kind of shoot out that sequence in our living room. So it's just like, it's just, if you want to do it, by come hell or high water, do it. Don't wait for somebody else to give you the opportunity. You have to take it. You have to kind of like, grab the bull by the horns for, a lame metaphor there. But that's what I would say. And just like always be nice and cherish the nice, kind, intensely creative people that inspire you. I feel really lucky that a lot of the people that I've like met over the past 15 years, I continue to work with. And the reason why I never say it's a film by Matt Matt Lawrence or Matthew John Lawrence, is because, I mean, and that's not an original, like, thing, but it's like I am in awe of the collaborations I have. I am a part of this. I help to steer the ship, but it's really just like, I don't want to let go of these people that, just are so, just make our stuff so much better than I could have possibly imagined. So just find those people and be so good to them and be such a like meet them creatively where they're meeting you, and just be good to them and love them. And that was my advice.
Wonderful advice. I'd second it right now. If this were a group chat, I'd be, giving it the 100% reaction. All right. Since we've concluded the formal interview, now we're going to jump on to the rapid fire 15, which is 15 quick questions just to get to know you, Matt, a little bit better. Trick is to not overthink them. It's not like a cool test or anything. Just about stuff that, your favorite things for people to get to know you a little bit better.
Cool.
All right. Question 1. What movie do you think you have seen the most in your life?
Ghostbusters by far. I think from basically age 1 through 7, not 1 through 7, like 3 through 7, I probably watched it almost every day.
Love it. Question 2. Is there a movie, a show, or a song that always makes you cry?
Oh man.
It doesn't have to be one of each of those, just any of them.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of songs that will remind me of somebody. There are some Beatles songs like Blackbird or Beach Boys songs that just like will remind me of like, my grandfather who I really loved and like miss him, just people that like aren't in your lives anymore or, have passed on. I think music definitely is the one that can do it for me. I think for some reason, movies I will avoid if they really like wreck me, just because it like a song like 3 minutes of kind of, and it might last after the song's done, but like I feel like it stays with me a little bit less than if I'm like in for a movie that's like 80 to like 120 minutes and it's just like a real heart wrencher or like it really reminds me of missing somebody. It can be brutal, but I'd say probably like Blackbird by the Beatles, or I mean there's several like Beatles or Beach Boys songs that just remind me of like grandparents or relatives or friends that have since passed.
Oh yeah, same. Definitely can relate to that. All right, next one. What is the first film that really scared you, or like gave you nightmares when you were a kid? Doesn't even have to be horror.
I was telling my friend about this the other day, and I hadn't thought of this memory in like no exaggeration, probably like at least 25 years. And it didn't happen 25 years ago, but it happened when I was even younger. Is I remember when I first started kind of like, and I had to have been like, no exaggeration, like 7 or 8 years old. And I started to kind of like dabble in horror movies, right? So like I probably watched like Gremlins and like a couple of kind of like lighter, more kind of like Amblin entertainment types of horror movies. And I remember telling my mom and my dad, like, I want to watch horror. Like, the conversation went like, I want to watch more of these types of movies. What movies should I watch? And I remember my mom was like, Halloween's my favorite horror movie. Like, it's really scary. And I was like, I really want to watch it. And I think my mom just thought, I don't know. My dad's not really a protector type, but like she thought like I'd feel safer with watching it with my dad. And I remember after that first point of view, the opening scene, I remember being so scared that I said I had to go to the bathroom and just like locking myself in the bathroom and being like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't finish this movie. But I also like don't want to tell, because like I think my parents were probably like, you don't have to watch it. If there's a really scary movie, you might not be ready to watch it. And I was like, no, I can watch it. I can watch it. And like literally probably like 3 minutes into watching it, I like am locking myself in the bathroom, like scared to death of having to either admit that that they were right and I was too scared to watch it, or just like abject terror for the next like 90 minutes. So that was like the first movie where I remember just feeling this like intense, like kind of like dread wash over my body of just being so frightened. And I still think like Halloween is such like an effective horror movie just in terms of like it's minimal. What everyone says, like the minimalism, just like it feels like, especially for a kid, it feels so visceral and real.
Definitely. Did you end up finishing the movie?
I didn't. No, not at that point.
Okay.
I still never have. No, I'm kidding. But
Still can't get past the trauma.
no, I think probably I like that's the only the where my memory, and again, like I think memory is such a funny thing because like even things that I'm sure happen, you argue with your like relatives or moms or dads or brothers, like that didn't happen that way. But my memory ends of me being in the bathroom. So I don't remember what happened after that, but I know there's no way I would have been able to like live through the next 90 minutes. So I think eventually probably my dad came to get me and was just like, yeah, let's watch something else.
All right, question 4. What's your favorite horror subgenre? Like slasher, supernatural, psychological?
And that's good. I'd say probably slasher. Yeah, I'd say probably slasher is my favorite. I mean, I love so many subgenres. Like right now, I'm hoping I have a script written for a demon movie, so I really like kind of possession or demon movies. I like kind of like horror subgenres that have some type of like mythology or world buildingness to it. So I'd say like it just like if a subgenre can kind of dabble in that or can fall into those categories, I typically kind of like gravitate towards those.
Nice. Question 5. What is your favorite comedy?
Wayne's World, hands down. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it's just like it's the best. I think it's like arguably my favorite, if not definitely top three. It's a comfort movie while at the same time is just I think such a sneaky film. It's a film that has a point of view. It says something. It's an allegory, like it's allegorical. But if you just want to experience a dumb buddy comedy, it's that too. Which I think is like the best. It is rapid fire jokes. It's so funny. It's so heartwarming, I think it has a message, which it like has, and it has kind of a punk rock attitude without having kind of the punk aesthetic to it.
Right. And it's such a time capsule too, on top of all
Yeah.
that. It's fun to watch
So
now.
good. Yeah. So good.
All right. Since you grew up in New Jersey, what movie do you think best represents New Jersey
Oh
or
man.
the East Coast, maybe in general?
So, I mean, there's a ton of really like I'd say Welcome to the Dollhouse is very New Jersey. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. It's this Todd Solondz movie from the
I
90s.
haven't seen it, but I know of it and I've always wanted to watch it. So maybe this is like a reminder to
Yeah,
bump it up on my list.
yeah, great. I mean, like clearly somebody that just understands like the New Jersey archetypes, and it's a little darker than I think just the typical New Jersey mindset. Like this, it's a really like when I say black comedy, it's the blackest of comedies. So it definitely skews darker than I would typically kind of like define. But it kind of has like a bit of like a crazy hyper indie movie. It has kind of like a chip on its shoulder, and I just think it's like it's really representative of what it was like growing up in New Jersey in the 90s.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to watch it.
Yeah. And the performances are like off the charts. It's like Heather Matarazzo is like one of the best teen acting like performances of that era. It's like it's great. I would really recommend it.
All right, will do. Question 7. Who is your favorite slasher villain?
Oh, who is my favorite slasher villain? I'd say maybe I think the most effective for me is probably still I would either say Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw, but I think more the family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I still like I that's like still one of the films that I'll watch every year, even if I'm not teaching it in a class. It's just such kind of a singular film. I think it's one of the best, not even just horror movies, just like American films of all time. There was nothing like it before. There's been nothing like it since. And I think just like how those characters came together, it's just like it has like just a feel like such a feeling of dread and just like it's so unnerving to kind of watch some of those scenes and just watch kind of how those characters are drawn up and how they behave. That I think that's the most effective for me.
Yeah, I always say one of the best villain intros, not even just slashers, but one of the best villain intros of all time is when you first see Leatherface when he slides that door open and comes
I,
out. It's just horrifying. Every time I watch it, I'm like,
I mean,
Still
That's
just as effective.
I mean, you want to talk about bookends of seeing a character that is like one of the most like absolutely kind of jaw-dropping, frightening moments, and then the absolute batshit nature of him just he's like, his leg is fucked up. He's just wielding the chainsaw. It's so like your ear is shattered with the noise, and then just kind of the cut to black. It's such a crazy intro to a character and where you leave the character at the end.
Agree 100%. All right, now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Do you have a favorite movie soundtrack? Not score, but just soundtrack. Since, you're in a band and all that, I got to ask some music.
Oh, this is good. I don't know if it's I'm trying to think I mean, Purple Rain, which is kind of cheating, but I mean, I was just listening to that last night. I mean, it's Prince, so like, what can you say? But that's like, every time I listen to that, I'm just like, why don't I listen to the? It's like one of those albums where I'm like, why don't I listen to this more? And I listen to it, quite a bit. I think there's some like the Empire Records soundtrack is like such a formative soundtrack from when I was growing up, and I still listen to it and love it. Yeah, I mean, those two immediately jump out to me. I know, like, as soon as this interview is done, something's going to pop in my head, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? I mean, The Decline of Western Civilization, but that's also kind of a cheat because it's a documentary about some of the best punk bands of all time. But I mean, that's another one that like, I could just like listen to that soundtrack all day. Some of Wes Anderson's stuff I really love, like Royal Tenenbaums soundtrack is really great. Yeah, I'd say those are up there, but I'm probably forgetting another couple dozen.
All right, got another music related one for you. What was the name of your band?
Oh man, I will say it, but please don't look online and find. Luckily, we were kind of like our tenure ended when MySpace was just finishing up. But the band I was in, where we recorded a record and toured, was called Raleigh St. Clair, and we were like, if you've ever listened to Saddle Creek bands from like the early to mid 2000s, like Cursive had this record called The Ugly Organ, but we were aggressive, violin and viola driven, like indie music. So we kind of had like upbeat stuff, or kind of like we could be heavy, but like we had somebody who played violin, viola, and cello. We had somebody who played keyboard and second guitar. So it was kind of like a mix of indie music with kind of like heavier emo from those years. And then I played in punk bands like in the beginning of college and high school and stuff like that. But that was the band that like we were kind of serious for a couple of years.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite concert experience, whether you attended just as a fan, or maybe a concert that you were playing at?
Oh man. As a band, yeah, there's like a bunch of like for some reason, this was before I moved to Boston, but it's like one of the reasons why my band, we would always play Massachusetts. We'd play like Boston or Lowell or Lunenburg, and it was amazing. Like there was just like, they always put on great shows. It just seemed like a community thing where people just showed up. And like from being in a band, like, you romanticize it, but like a lot of shows, you're playing to like, unless you're on like a really good tour, which we only got to experience a couple of times, you're playing to like a place with five to 10, maybe 15 people max. So people would always show up and show out for those shows. As far as stuff, I mean, my wife and I love going to shows. So I try and see everything from like, there's a couple of really amazing small bars that are within walking distance of where we live in Philly, like Kung Fu Necktie and Johnny Brenda's. So, we'll see smaller shows there. But then like, we'll see, big stadium level concert stuff. Like I think in the past year, stuff we've seen that I've really loved, it's tough to whittle it down, of all time, is we saw ELO play, which I'd never seen. I'd never seen Jeff Lynne or ELO play before, and I'd grown up with them. So that was like very kind of like nostalgic and like beautiful, and he sounded great. And it was just like an amazing experience. The section we were in was really great. I saw Shannon and the Clams, this past year. They were incredible. Even I saw Green Day do Dookie and American Idiot. That was amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, we try and go like at least every other week to see a show. Just because like there's nothing like seeing, there's this band End It, which is a Baltimore hardcore band that I'm absolutely like, I've been gaga over for the past couple of years. Anytime they play around, they're great. So yeah, I mean, those are bands recently that I've seen that I've been kind of really inspired by. But I mean, it's crazy. Like that's what I was hoping for. Like I mentioned that I was in this kind of like funk writing wise, is I feel like anytime I go to a show, if it's like a good show, just being able to like check out and just kind of like let music wash over you. I feel like sometimes it feels like doing mushrooms or something where it's just like a nice mental reset. I feel like if I really get into it, it's like a nice mental reset where I kind of can drop a lot of the bullshit that's been swimming in my head. So with all those, I felt like really kind of inspired and, just kind of creatively charged after those.
Yeah, that's great. There's not a lot of opportunities to be listening so intentionally and like experiencing with all your senses so intentionally.
Yeah.
And I think concerts are one of those like few times when we get to kind of engage that way. So I can totally see what you mean, that it's just like it can be very refreshing reset for your mind and body.
Yep.
Got another music related question for you. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh man. Depends how many drinks I've had. Like if I'm with a group of people who I can let loose with, or I'm like lit, I'll do like Beastie Boys "Fight for Your Right to Party." But if I'm kind of feeling out the room, I might do like "Flagpole Sitta" by Harvey Danger. There's a couple of Buzzcock songs I like to sing. It really depends. I love karaoke, so it really depends on like my mood or like what I've been listening to intensely like in the months leading up to that. If I've been like obsessing over like a certain song, then I might kind of break that out. But I'd say like ones that I've done multiple times, I'd say it's Beastie Boys "Fight for Your Right," like Harvey Danger, "Flagpole Sitta." But yeah, karaoke, give me a song and I'll sing it.
That sounds great. All right, one last music related question. What would be your walkout music or your entrance music? Like if you were a ball player or you're going to box or something, or a TED Talk, whatever it might be. What's the music like you would choose to represent you and kind of like pump up the crowd?
Becky, these are so good. I feel like I should have been better prepared to answer them. I
This one
like
always stumps people because it's like, what? I don't know. I've never even thought about that.
And you want it to, and I think like that's such a good way that you framed it is like you're also like, man, this is like my introduction to people. This is like who I am. Oh man, let me just think. Immediately stuff that, oh, you know what I love is like "Flock of Seagulls" Space Age love song. I think is such a like beautiful, strange kind of like, it has this kind of like otherworldly kind of sound to it. So I think, and I love kind of the opening of it. It has such kind of like a really cool, like weird kind of guitar riff to it. But it's like kind of sweet, but like kind of it kind of gets you going. Yeah, I'd say that one. There's this, if I'm looking for like a punk or like a punky kind of metally, like a hard rock song to come out to, there's this band Warthog that I really like, and they have a song called "Brainwasher." And it just like, when it kicks, if you're talking about like a walkout song, like the first 30 to 45 seconds of that song, you just want, like, that's something like if I was a wrestler, that'd be such a cool song to walk out to, because it just like, it's so riffy and heavy, and it starts with the guy just like growling in the opening over this riff. So yeah, that's a really good one if you want to like just like really kind of like scare people and check them. But if not, I'd go with like "Space Age Love Song." It's such kind of a sweet, lovely song.
Love that duality there. All right, question 13. What is one movie you wish you could go back in time and see in theaters for the first time with a live audience?
Man. Just being a like a student of film, I can't imagine. Like, I would just be so. It's not even. I think it's great. I think it's like I love the movie. Every time I watch it, I love it. But it's not like a fave of mine. But just as far as hearing people talk about the first time they saw it, and just kind of like seeing through like film history and documentary, like seeing Jaws in a theater like opening weekend with people, I think I would just like, that would just kind of be such a, like, just hearing how like completely like would just annihilate an audience. So like that like immediately comes to mind. I'm sure there's like things I'd forget. Like, I would love to see, before like, it started being kind of talked about during its release, but I would love to see Psycho, but specifically see the shower scene if people don't know it's coming and like haven't been accustomed to, the film history we have, or the horror film history. So it's just like, I mean, I'm just like, that's such a good question because like, especially being so into entertaining or just like audience movies that like, I can't imagine what this is like watching this for the first time where like you don't know what's coming and it hits you and it's like this such a cultural touchstone. So I'd say like Jaws or Psycho or something like just something that became such a cultural moment and like really seemed to kind of like reshape at least a certain segment of film history or certain genre would be such a like I always think about stuff like that of like man it must be if I could just have a bunch of like throwaway wishes like it would be cool to just be able to transport to like see a movie during like the first weekend of its release or whatever.
Yeah, those are both great answers, and probably movies like if I were to sit down and make a list would definitely be on there, especially like Jaws because it's like the first blockbuster, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unofficially, I guess, but seeing how people reacted to that and Psycho, of course, comes to mind because any movie with a major iconic sort of twist or different breaking a framework that people are used to must just been so exciting to see for the first time. So I love both of those answers. All right, we're at question 14, the penultimate question. So if you could program a double feature of any two films to kind of show the world kind of your two wolves, kind of like we're talking about like two different walkout music to show two different sides of yourself with Flock of Seagulls and Warthog. If there were two films that you could show as a double feature that represent you, what would they be?
Oh man, these are good. Damn. Trying to think. Okay, so this may be, and this is really just off the dome. I'm sure, again, this is going to be a question where I think about it 5 minutes from now and I have a different one. But, recently I watched the movie for the first time and it's like, it's absolutely became a new fave is the movie Waitress. It's from like the first aughts. When is it? Like
Yeah, I know the movie.
2005 or 2007. And I think it's so lovely. It's such like an indescribable. I had thought from like because I didn't see it when it first came out, and just from like the way in which it was marketed and advertised, I thought it was going to be a completely different movie. But it's so much smarter. It's so heartfelt without being saccharine or like just it's not like a poser type of movie. It's so lovely, and it's just like it has such kind of like I don't know, it just has this thing to it. And I love like how it mixes stuff. It's like it can be very serious and dramatic. And I just love the character study. And I love how it kind of has this, you can see kind of the director's obsessions, whether it be food and motherhood and stuff like that. I think it's so lovely. And I feel like there's so few movies, not that I'm an expert on like small town life in parts of, the South or the Midwest, but it feels like it feels like it has this like really authentic voice to it. So I thought that'd be fun to watch with something like Texas Chainsaw, which I think, there's a world in which they both kind of have this weird food obsession. They both kind of deal with, I mean, Waitresses doesn't really have anything to do with post-industrialization, but just kind of like rural life or a life outside of kind of the city and suburbs. And I think they're just wildly different. I feel like they have some like overlaps in like their obsessions and like motifs and stuff like that. But I feel like they're such like in a good way, it'd be kind of like a whiplash type of thing where they're so wildly different, but they're two types of movies that I think are so like I'm fascinated by because it feels like a really unique singular voice that's doing something like truly authentic and like also like really engaging an audience and giving them their money's worth, but just in a wildly different way using some of the same materials.
I'd buy tickets. I'll go to this double feature.
No, there's gonna be something better, but those two. I mean, I was just thinking. Whenever I bring up like Texas Chainsaw, I start thinking about it. I'm like, man, I haven't seen that on a big screen in like probably like 10 or 15 years. And Waitress was one that I'm like, man, I want to see this again with like an audience. It just seems like a movie that I would just love to sit down. And they do have kind of there's some weird Venn diagram that they share some stuff together.
For sure, I can see it. You could certainly write a great essay about it too.
Oh, hell yeah.
All right, question 15, the last one of the rapid fire 15. What is your dream project? Is there an original idea, an IP that you want to tackle, a historical figure that you want to bring to life? Do you have a wild and crazy dream project? that you can talk about that maybe isn't in
Yeah.
the works already or something?
I mean, I would never turn down pre-existing IP. I think it'd be a great challenge, but there isn't one that like I'm like this would be I would drop everything for this. But yeah, there's a couple of projects that I'm working on now. Like Uncle Peckerhead was about a band that went on tour, yada yada yada. Even in Bloody Axe Wound, Sam is part of it plays in a band that's part of this record label that the band from Uncle Peckerhead's on. So I have this third script written, that demon script I was telling you about, that's about a band. It's a different story, but it's about like this three-piece, another three-piece punk band where one of the bandmates' brothers turns into a demon. And that's one I'm really excited about. That it's a dream just because I would love to do it again and collaborate with the friends that I've collaborated with. And I think it's something that is feasible that we could make. So that's one that like I think would be a dream to kind of get together with my friends and make again. And there's like I have this kind of Capra-esque sci-fi, kind of like a sweet kind of dramedy sci-fi that I would love to make. It'd be a bigger budget. It's definitely like kind of in the Amblin Entertainment of like, the 80s and 90s feel to it. It's definitely like not as hard of a genre, as the other stuff I've done, but it's like something that like, I kind of have that if I ever got like a really big opportunity where somebody's like, hey, listen, like we've got a lot of resources behind us. What's a script that like there's no way in hell you can foresee making unless you have this type of backing? That'd be a script that I would definitely like, share with a studio or just somebody that had kind of the connections.
Awesome. I love it. The very achievable dream and then the dream that maybe comes next after the next couple of movies.
High in the sky. Yeah,
yes. I think any artist probably has a few of those. Well, thank you so much for all of your like candid, honest answers to even some of the more challenging questions. Really appreciate it. If folks want to, kind of follow what you're doing, is there any social media you want to direct them to?
Yeah, sure. I'd say like you can visit the filmmaking collective that I belong to with my friends. It's called subtleTrex.com, just subtle as in understated. Trex.com, no dashes, no slashes, no nothing. And then I'm Kid Dynamat on Instagram. I'm Young Bull on Twitter or X, but I think my social media. I'm not a very good social media person, especially because I don't like the men that are running it. But I just want to say, Becky, I just want to thank you for conducting such a thoughtful interview with such great questions and being so kind with your words about like my films and my work. It really was a blast to get to chat with you, and it really means a lot that you took time out of your day to talk to me about it.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to chat with you. It's really fun experience for me. Sometimes when I watch a movie at random and I love it, and then years later I end up talking to the person behind it. It's just one of those wonderful things about existing around the peripheries of the industry that sometimes you get to bump into people that inspired you at one point or the other. So very much appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. And anyone listening, please do check out Bloody Axe Wound. It's available pretty much anywhere that you stream movies, like Apple TV, Amazon, Fandango, Google Play. You can find it to rent or purchase, and it will be coming to Shudder in early spring. So I know a lot of people that listen have Shudder subscriptions, so you can also wait for it then. But thank you again, Matt, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Appreciate it, Becky. Take care.